This is the season of amplification. This is a special season for those who grew in their reverence for God while going through the turmoil of the COVID pandemic. You are now in position for a level change. And when I say a level change, it's not a level up, but a level of depth. See, it's an Eurocentric perspective to think the higher you go in life, the closer to God you become. But in ancient African wisdom, it tells us that it is the depth of your knowledge, the depth of your wisdom, the depth of your understanding, and how you allow it to live through you in your actions that gives you the opportunity to get behind the veil where God exists. This is a special season for those who have a healthy fear in God and not in a COVID mutation or a variant that continues to put restraints on our old way of living. Because in the depth of our understanding, we know that change is imminent, and our ability to adapt to change will reflect on how we fulfill God's purpose in our lives. We are still on a mission, regardless of the COVID pandemic. This season of amplification is a special season for those who spent God's currency wisely. And that's that extra time we were given to spend in our households, to fortify our relationships with our families. That extra time we had to edify our minds, our bodies, and our spirits, so we become more prepared to walk in this new beginning. This is a special season. See, the number 22 is considered a master number because it duplicates and amplifies divine energy. At this moment in time, for the next 365 days, you are getting double the strength, double the creativity, double the protection, double the drive and determination, double the love. This season of amplification, yes, you are made ready for your spiritual breakthrough of 22. Everything is in your reach, but it's still up to you to go get it. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Uh, this is a new year. We just finished the African history class. Hopefully you got to see it. If not, of course, it's saved, it's stored, it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook. Please hit me up if you're trying to play catch up. But I definitely wanted to drop that this year because dealing with African spirituality, we look at things. Everything is connected to God. Everything is runs through God. Everything is on behalf of God. We are grateful for all things in life because all things in life is God. Um, there is no video for this segment. There is no curriculum handout page. I know here in my community, what we did is it was mandatory for us to read a lot. We have to read the world around us. We had to read different cultures. We had to read a whole bunch of things to understand that the world God has us in and understand who we are in God. So
the first book that was requested for us to read in terms of developing our ability to incorporate spirituality, African spirituality, in our Christian walk, is to reclaim the faith, was to go back and start diving in and helping pull out. It helps you pull out those falsehoods, those influences, European influences, and so this is what we did. I'll begin also to say, I am is the two most strongest words in the dictionary. I am is the two most strongest words in the dictionary, and I come to you saying that I am, and it's the Moses code. If you don't know, um, I am that, and then the comma after that, I am, meaning that you can say something from with your mouth, and it so shall it be. The power of your tongue. As we get into African spirituality, you'll realize the power of your words, your sounds, your thinking. Ooh. But I am a seeker of truth, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. I am not the expert, but I'm joining you on this journey so that we can take our time to understand what was going on, or what is going on in terms of African spirituality, and how we should take a look at it or see it, or what it is, and then actually how it is actually truly the root of every other faith. Why? Because it is the oldest. If you listen to African history class, it's the oldest wisdom on the face of the planet. It is what gave birth to everything else. And so taking the time to understand that is something that we should do. Now, I'm one to tell you that yeah, do I have a place I go? Yes. Yeah, my church is a Pan African Orthodox Christian churches where I choose to say that this is my faith, this is my church, this is where we come together as a mass. Do I have a sect of African culture that I particularly follow? Right? Yes, I do. And so we'll deal with that when we start breaking down the different types of faith, and we'll start probably bringing in people from Yoruba, Ifa, Dagbani, um, just different areas, and have them discuss their faith according to some of the topics that we see in this particular book. And we will be looking at different books so that we can get a grasp, and then we will be comparing how African spirituality is in everything, so there's not. So now to let y'all know, man, I was working hard to get this lesson together. All right. So in African spirituality, if there is 4,200 uh, tribes in Africa, there's 4,200 versions of African spirituality. That is one of the things that we learned in the book, going through the book. Today we're on chapter 5, but we want to give a recap before we get to chapter 5. But yeah, we know that there's multiple ways. And so what we're looking at is trying to find some commonalities. And if it's not a commonality, when we come up with a topic, what does the different tribes view it as? Even though that there are similarities, they just may voice it different. They have a pure belief, but they may voice it a little bit different. And so we went through the process of understanding that, and understanding that all forms of religion, it doesn't matter whether it's monotheism, polytheism, anonism, it's all African, everything. And so we also discussed the categories, the major categories of spirituality, which is Mtu, Kintu, Hantu, and Untu. And one is the first one, Mtu, is everything endowed with intelligence. And so we're gonna play catch up since we missed a week because of the holiday season. Yes, and then the Kintu is plants, trees, animals, and minerals. The Hantu is time and space, and that has two areas, which is the Sasa and the Zumani. And we're going to talk about the Sasa and Zumani because it connects every aspect of spirituality and God. The Sasa and Zumani, and the Kuntu is the modality, or how we express our faith. And that's another thing, because expressing spirituality is big in black people. Why? You know what I mean? It's because it's just our culture. We need to, it's just our expression. It's a part of our tradition. It's a part of our culture. It's our heritage. It was a part of who we were in the civilizations that we created. You got to watch African history. Why? Because you want to understand who were the people creating such greatness. We said that everything was God. Everything was God. There was not an aspect in life in African culture that was not God. And so we discussed the nature of God, and we dealt with that, and we said, like everything else within the nature of God, omnipresent, omnipotent, omnificent, everything. And so in today's conversation, and I'm gonna flow the best way I can, because yeah, I was putting together these notes. I was working and putting these notes together. But we're gonna walk ourselves through it. Today we're discussing, wait, let me get it right. The work of God. Wow. In African Spirituality, chapter 5, we're dealing with the work of God. And if you and one of the reasons why this academic approach, which is a good thing, allowing our kids to have an academic approach of understanding African spirituality gives them a foundation that we in terms of identity. So when as they grow up, they will be able to articulately express the who, what, when, why of their faith. And so we do an intellectual process. And it's a part of the deconditioning process of having faith given to us, or doctrination that is not of who we are as a people. And so we want to take a look at uh, um, African spirituality academically, and we're going to see how it relates to where we are, um, and then slowly embrace the spirituality of our tradition, culture, and heritage as a people. It's not a primitive. It's so far vast, and than we could even understand. Again, and so what was done, what was given to us in Africa was not what where we are. What was given to us is definitely not where we are. It's not who we were as a people. Put it that way. And so again, there is we normally have we have something in our community called the People's Library, where I create classes from. Yeah, this is not the People's Library. This is IJ reading and understanding, seeking knowledge and wisdom and understanding and truth, and I'm sharing it with you. And so, in the phase of the work of God, when it comes to African spirituality, it is and then you'll see in these separate slides, you'll see names from tribes all over the continent, because again, 4,200 tribes. And so when John Mbiti put this book together, it was a an interview of multiple tribes, multiple ways of life, multiple cultures, to find some sense of commonality, or if it's not a commonality, of how do you define the work of God? Like he said, how do you define the nature of God? How do you define time? How do it was the untu, kintu, hantu, and kantu. How do you define these things? What is most important? Are you monotheistic, polytheistic? How do you define them? How does that work with your everyday encounters or exchange? Where they say that everything is sacred under God. Everything is sacred. So if everything is sacred, you'd understand how that they lived as a people and were able to create great civilizations, great communities. To understand the civilizations is to understand, and what we gave to the world as a planet, as a people, what we gave to the planet as a people, is to understand our faith in the Creator. And so the work of God starts with, of course, the creation. And so in every faith, you have a creation story. And because there is no written story in African spirituality, in the multiple different faiths that are, there is no written story. So you when speaking and looking at it, or reading the book that we had to read in our community, yeah, you look at the book, and it tells you, according to multiple different cultures, they see it all the same. Not the same, but they define it. The words they use and the terms they use may be different. However, what they say is clear, and the title, Akin title, Akin, not Akin, I can. The Akan tribe title Bori Bori, it means given, means creator. So it's a title that they give the creator. He is the creator. He is the originator. He is the inventor. He is the architect. The universe is described as having its architectural form from God. And in that space, in that reading, and it all talks about everything being in harmony with God. There is not one thing that is not in harmony, is not in sync with the architectural structure. And he said, wait, before I dropped, was one about, oh man, there was another one where it said, and I thought I grabbed it, where that not only did God create the universe, but along with it, it's not in here. He created laws. There were laws of nature that goes with the architecture. And those laws of nature is based on the harmonious balance that the world exists in. And that's simple as photosynthesis. You know what I mean? And if you don't understand what photosynthesis is, it's when it rains, water falls in the leaves, it absorbs in the leaves, it goes into the ground, absorbs in the roots, it turns into steam, it goes back up, and it's a cycle of life. Everything has a cycle of life. Everything is a architectural form of God. And if it's not in harmony with God, it's not. It's just something that we are against. And that's another thing that we talk about. We being the people of God have to be in that architectural form. How do we be the God's chosen? To be the first on the planet to gift the world with the wisdom that we have. Yet in this country in which we live in, we don't seek to be self-governed. We seek the government of something that teaches us as second-class citizens. That's why voting is important. Putting people in place that represent who you are as a people, and then continuing to build, to duplicate that architectural form of God, and then mimicking and mirror imaging those laws. And so in this, the fact that women, and we'll take a look at this, women would name all their children, African names are tied to the creator, because there is nothing in the universe that does not come from that architectural form. God's work is all of creation. God's work is all of creation. And now some individuals may have, there is no form of which, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes, but women were so connected to that experience that this is a divine experience. Everything, even me having children, I had to relate their names to the creator that created them. And it says, Banyarawans, women of childbearing age, would carefully leave water around before they go to bed, so that God could use the water to create or form children with it. It was called God's water. Woo! It was called God's water, because he is the giver of children. So now you mean creation, because when they did pottery, and they spun pottery, and they made pottery with what? Water. And so they understood that I can't create a child. It's not something I do. And I know what creation is for me, because I create the pottery of our community. So there was water is sacred. And even in the rituals that we do, water is a conduit to communicate with your ancestors. Mm. And hopefully we'll get into that. And if it's not into this, we'll get into it down the road. No, not hopefully. We will be getting into that. Not this time, but we'll be getting into it. And this is why names were so important. It was a state of reverence. We look at our names and, we talk about, I'm not naming my kid no Africa. And we turn our noses up on something that shows reverence to who created the child. Women did not even take responsibility for it. I can't name my kid what I want to name him. I have to connect them to the creator. that did it. And that's where you get the potter. When we talk about the potter's house and look at how ancient African wisdom seeped into Christianity, and we don't want to give it its due, but we're going to give it its due today. That's why they call God the potter. He creates, he forms in an African wisdom and culture, the tradition. This is what they knew. I can create this, the shape, the bend, the feel with the water. Yes, he is the potter. And so as when they say go into the potter's house, that's not something that is European. That is something that comes from ancient African wisdom. Wow. Do you know how that blew my mind when I saw that? Go ahead, TD Jakes. You African, brother, and you're speaking ancient African wisdom, brother. So now, rewrite the Christianity that you serve so that it focuses on where the knowledge came from. Wow, that blew my mind. Okay, we gotta get. I'm sorry, I gotta keep form. I don't have it. Is this it? Yeah. Now, you got to see these. You'll see a lot of pop-ups, a lot of slides. It was a lot of creation done today. A whole lot creation done to just last night and this morning. Now there are no agreement in the order of creation. There's no agreement where this came, this came, this came, this came. No, it changes according to the tribe. 4,200 different tribes, 4,200 versions of spirituality, but they all give reverence to one God. Whether they're polytheistic or neotheistic, they all give credence to one God. And so the one tribe says it was the heavens, the earth, man as in man and wife. Okay? In African spirituality, the beings, the man as a being, men didn't come before the woman, woman didn't come before the man. No. When they even read in the scripture, they say, when they say man, they mean mankind. Man, plants, and animals. There's nobody coming from a rib. No, God created African people. Period. Another tribe says the sky or the heavens, the earth, the rivers, the waters, the plants, then man, and then the animals. And so there's no set form. However, there is one agreement, one thing that goes unsaid is the fact that it all came from God. It all came from God. And then again, we're dealing with in African spirituality, the works of God. We just left the creation, and now we're talking about God's providence and sustenance. God's providence and sustenance. And it's one fundamental concept provided here is that God made everything, period. And when you get to that understanding, you realize that why in African culture you don't even take credit for your own children. You don't name your children, no, just after things that you in life. No, you connect your children to an experience, your understanding in God. Can I personally say, yes, my daughter's name is Ayana Montilla, beautiful one who serves God. Last name means stand as a nation because God is with us. We are a part of a community that takes you back where you earn your African name. Some of us are birthed with it. I know there are brothers and sisters in my family. Half my family's Muslim and half my family's Christian. And, I sit in the middle, but half of us got two names. And I grew up with friends who were half Muslim and half Christian or had Christian names, what we call European names, and cultural names. Chinese people do it. You can ask somebody, what's your Chinese name? And they'll tell you. Japanese people do it. What's your Japanese name and what's your European name? And they'll tell you, wait a minute. Indian people do it. The name, their African name and their European name, or no, not the African name, but their spiritual name, their tribal name, and then their European name. Why? Because their tribal name has to connect them to their culture. And so we have that is one of the most powerful ceremonies you'll ever experience. But one of the most fundamental things is that God has provided everything. And then the tribe listed, it said they have a name for God that means he who supplies the needs for his creation. Whoa. Meaning that it doesn't matter. And we always talk about, man needs to be a provider. Pause. A man provides according to the opportunity that he gets from God. That's it. I say I do my best to provide for my family by surrendering to God. Because he who supplies the needs of his creation, that is something that God does. So you go to the creator, and I remember someone asking me, God, one love to Bishop Tariq, and he watches me. That's one of my spiritual fathers. Real talk. I don't know how y'all feel about him, but I love him. He said, "How do you define man? What makes you a man?" And I paused, and he said, "One when we started talking in this group, this men group that we have, and he said one who submits to the will of God." Why? Because God will give you the things that you need to perform the duties and tasks and responsibilities that you have to your family, to your community, to Him. Supplies everything. Other societies incorporate God's name in their children. We talked about, and oh, okay, that's where it was. I thought it was separate. I thought I forgot it. But it's a part of it. Because children, everything come from God. Everything. Ajay, and he named me. Ajay is means the messenger of God or the prophet of God. Everything comes from God. And so if God provides for everything he creates, then what do you need? And so even in the part of healing, he also heals. All healing comes from God. And so now when we talk, we're going wait, I'm going to sit here for a second. Where we at? I'm going to sit here for a second, right? I just want to sit here, right? Because a lot of times I don't want my background to go past it, and you see the virtual stuff stop because it's not an endless stream. Right, this is all live, this is not pre-recorded, I'm coming straight to you, and we're working this out because we want to be able to have the dialogue and community. Again, we will be opening these classes to the public to have these discussions and interactions. God, all healing comes from the creator, meaning that balance that we talked about with God, the architectural balance of the earth. Everything is in balance, and you got herbs upon herbs upon herbs upon herbs. That wisdom, that what herbs will do. And how did Africans know what herb fixes what? It's in your DNA. I hope you come to a Kibaland Inspirational Sunday to realize how much data is in your bloodstream. How much information is in your DNA? What is the coding of your chromosomes? And then that the code always changes, and God is inside you, always adding to the code that is you. All healing comes from God. So there is no you talk about God's providence and sovereignty, everything is the creator. And so even in the symbols that we talk about behind us, the symbols that they have, the enunciation is Genyame, right? I always got to get that right. African and Dinka symbols that reflect their relationship in God, because everything is God. And so when we talk about healing and giving, people can take the credit. I went to the doctor, but the doctor got his wisdom and his ability to go to school and study, and his mind and his thoughts, his drive, his energy to become a doctor. He got that from God. So you may thank him, but thank God, the fact that God works through him. We're going to get there. Yes, the works of God. There is nothing in life that is accomplished without the experience of God when it comes to African African spirituality. So when we talking about Christianity and you have Christians who bash African ways and you got Africans who bash Christian ways, that's not of God. Because it's all us. It's all God. There's no reason to bash anyone's belief. 4,200 cultures in Africa. Nobody's forcing anybody. The only time that you're forced to change your perception and your spirituality, when we'll get to that, is through the invasion of Europeans in Africa, where they were forcing Christianity down the throats of African spiritualists. We'll talk about that. So we're reclaiming that. And so I added, God is revealed as the source of nourishment. He feeds us. He's the giver of life. He brings us here. He sustains us. He supports us and our existence. There is nothing we have in African spirituality. There's nothing you experience outside of God. Powerful. I'm drinking this cup. Thank you, God, for the cup. Thank you, God, for the water. Thank you, God, for the technology and the ability to communicate. Everything is God in African spirituality. And how many times, what would life be like if everybody said that there's nothing disconnected from my experience of God and believed it? Not say it, because we say it, but do you believe it? Because then that changes how we interact with one another. That's sacred. But today we're talking about the works of God. And so then there's another one, God works, other than creation. And we went from creation to God's providence and sustenance. And we have also, God also sends afflictions. And now this was a difficult one, right? Because it's like everything gets permission. I know in Christianity they say the devil has to get permission to God to even mess with you. In African spirituality, as I was reading the book, it stated that if a family is going through a turmoil and trouble, and a family can't shake it, that family is being punished by God. It's going through the affliction. There's something that family must do. Even when you're doing African rituals, and there is a break between relationships in a family, God says, well, you were going to have a hard time until you mend that, because there is no expression of me inside how you are in family. Wow. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? And I know I've had my personal experience of family. And I tell him, I said, I had my brother, Tracy Sanders, one love, I love you. Well, went through some trauma or some issues with my family on my mother's crossing. And my brother Tracy could tell that I was having issues, right? And Tracy's a brother from another mother, one love. And so Tracy called me and he said, look, I can see that you hurting behind what your family has done. Absolutely. He said, and I knew I was wrong when I was hurting from what my family did when my mom transitioned. And he said, look, when you find that your brothers and sisters are no longer in your prayers, you are not in line with God, and God is going to give you a hard time. Ain't that something? And so I had to check my spiritual beef, my lack of being aligned, my alienation. That's the word my church uses, from my family. And said, because I don't want God to send his affliction upon me and my family, let me at least pray on their behalf. And my altar stays busy on behalf of my family. I said, I hope you never need me, because that means God is always providing for you. Ain't that something? So we have to be careful, because God does send afflictions. Okay, we got to get to that, back to that spot. And it says, some societies say that in one way or another, afflictions are associated with God. So in an African spirituality, they're dealing with diseases and pandemics, and something happens. And so they say, one form or another, God is either working with our immune system till you catch a cold, and the minute you get over it, your immune system is actually stronger. You catch a cold and you get a root, and you're learning how this root affects you. Does this herb work? And you're learning the different herbs. Man, please, when COVID hit, I immediately went to understanding how to purify the temple of which my body is. So diseases and epidemics, they say somehow and it's different for COVID, because we know COVID was man-made, and so that's not of God, that's of man, and so we got to get that. However, some afflictions are, and then they said mental disturbances, mental illnesses are tend to be blamed on spirits. Woo! Talk about it. Now, when you're dealing with uh, faith that are younger than the ancient wisdom of African spirituality, demons and spirits and energy beings is real. That the poverty demon is a spirit, right? Depression is a spirit, you know. Or somebody angry, you know. There's a lot of spirits going around. What spirit do you allow yourself to embody? So he says you got to be careful. Even in African spirituality, they said homosexuality is a spirit. It's called that word just slipped my mouth. It's a jinn. And so they see that as a spirit. Why? Because it's not in harmony with God. And so they don't, okay, well, you chose to live with the spirit. Okay. And that's how they look at it. Or when they see it, they have a ritual. And it's not a negative ritual. It's a ritual of herbs and prayer and meditation for a child. And then it's gone. Wow. But that's when you're in tune and connected to God. We've been people so far removed. Even when we have that spirit of depression, how do you bring somebody in that experience? By bringing them, you got to bring them to God, because you can't reason them out of it. You can't, that statement of poverty is a spirit. Any spirit this alcoholism, drugs, it's all that negative spirit when you're governed by that. The spirit of addiction. Woo! That's not a God. That's of a spirit. And so there are rituals and prayers that we use to move beyond God's those demons or afflictions. So God is responsible for all natural calamities. Why? Because everything is God. Now, the most death being one of the most puzzling. Now, this was when reading this was a little extra, because with the Bakongo people, they say God never, well, it's not never, God never does wrong. And so when someone dies, they say he died by God. When you're not murdered and anything like that, he died by God. When it's time, when someone gets sick, it was his time. He died by God. Why? Because we did everything we could to heal him. And so when we do what we can do, now you give God his sovereignty, the works. And so that's when people pray. That's when people meditate. That was when people do rituals. That's a part. Pray on God's comes you with your healing. That is not something new. That is ancient African wisdom. And the Burundi people say he is the giver and the hater of children. That one hit me like, whoa. Why? Because when a child dies, you can't explain it. And so sometimes, they have to give everything to God, because there's some things that man can't explain. And so God knows what God knows. God knows why. We don't. And so in those moments, you give sovereignty. And I remember when I had to give, God is doing what God is going to do, and you can't, even though He gives us the power. Man, the power of free will. My lesson on free will hurt my soul when someone looked at me and I was like, "Do you know who you are?" And they were like, "Yes, I do. However, I have free will and I can make a choice not to be." What level of anti-God is that? And that, for those who know me, that was the moment Ajay said he needed to become the African all over again. Woo! I need to make my journey back home because I became somebody I wasn't. In Yoruba, they say death is when it is your time, when your time is up. When your time is up on earth, that is when it's time for you to go home. And I don't know how many times you see grandma and grandma say, "Baby, it's okay. It's time for me to go." I remember, wow, there's a video that my brother has of my mom, and as we were battling cancer, she knew that, no, I'm not winning this one. We won it for 14 years. We were battling for 14 years. And then she looked and she said, "Yeah, this is not the one I win. Mom, we got time." No. And you hear her on it. She says, "I wish I could stay, but I can't this time." Full of energy, full of life, walking up and down, everything. She just in her spirit knew it. But it's my time. I can't break the rules, so I'm going to go. And I was like, wow, my brother captured that on video. Uh, one of my grandfathers was passing away, and he came to the house to pick up my little brother Benny. And Benny and Pumpkin, and I can see if I can find them, and that's on the Carter side for those who are listening in my family. He came and he took Benny and Pumpkin out and had a ball. And so we sat with Benny, and I think that Benny was really, really small. He was like 3 at the time. And so, "Oh, what happened? What y'all do? So and so, so on." And he said, I said, "So you go, oh, so you gonna go see Grandpa later?" And he said, "Grandpa won't be here tomorrow." My mother was like, "What?" So yeah, Grandpa won't be here tomorrow. He took me and Pumpkin out and he sat us down and he said he going home tomorrow. Some people can know when it's their time. That's when you're connected. Ancient African wisdom. This is old. This is old. It's older than time. Come on. We were there from the beginning. Wow. All people came from us. There is no race walking the planet that does not have a connection to us. We just got to connect to ourselves and the creator now, right? So you can be able to tell when your time, your Hantu is available. We're gonna get into that in a little bit too, because we talk about that here. And so in that space of God's calamities, we've learned what? To have joy in the journey. When everything is God, your fight, your struggle, your climb, when everything is God, how can you not have joy in it? You know, that's African wisdom. They're not gonna be hard on themselves, and you always see, "How are you? Look, how are you doing?" And then you see the images of the happy African old man always, because the connection to the Creator, which creates him connected to his people, connect to his journey. Your joy comes from within. Why? Because within you is God. Wow. That is African, ancient African wisdom. And to realize how much we think we don't embrace African spirituality, to see how much that we embrace African spirituality. We just got to get aware of it and then dive deeper. If you've seen the opening and it tells you this is that moment in time where you dive deeper in God to find to be able to manifest all things that he called you to manifest. God ain't helping you. That's clear. God ain't helping you. When you sit down and you see people accepting awards and you listen to the music and listen to what they talk and what they do, that's not God. And I'm going to say they just hit that. You can see people's wealth and where their wealth came from. So you got to know. but find joy in your journey regardless of what happens to you in your journey. So even through the afflictions of life, there's love. Why? Because there's God. Now, the next work of God is the government of God. Oh, what? The government of God. Now, how do they look at, well, what you mean the government of God? And that's something to talk about. And that's easy. In the book, it stated that a lot of them see it as that it's the capacity, in this capacity in terms of the government of God. God is regarded to the king, ruler, lord, or judge. Hmm. And then you see the Banyarwanda tribe and the Burundi tribe call him the supreme ruler and governor, which means that you didn't need, how Israel, oh, God said you don't need a king. I am that. When you have a people who are surrendered unto God, and it says, no, we want a king, and that king has to mimic you. It ain't you, it's a man that mimics you. Wow. Let's talk about ancient wisdom. And then don't forget the symbol that I use on African spirituality is means the supreme God. There's only but one. What's that? Baluba tribe said, "He who rules and reigns over all things." And then are you realizing that they're not using any type of information that's different than what modern people say about who's God? So you realize that you're not saying something different than what your ancestors has said. So what is the problem with embracing your African spirituality? They even what said prayers for hunting indicate God governs the affairs of man and nature. So when they go hunting in the book, chapter 5, when they go out hunting, they say, hey, please, God, rituals allow us to catch the animals we hunt. Now, if you was in African history class and you talked about the first civilization, and it said that they were in so much in harmony with God, the big cats walked with them. The big cats, these are the in the jungle. Kush had cats just chilling. Why? Because there was abundance of food. You need to eat. Eat. No, what he wants is food. You look like food, smell like food. Feed him. And if he's full, he not eating you. Feed him in harmony. So everything, God is the ruler and the governor of all things, and he's the governor of you. They said there is nothing you can do or achieve or accomplish without the government. Let me go back to the government of God. Where's that at? Without the government of the creator. And that's why everybody, if you win an award, you're giving thanks. There was one conversation I had with students a while back when we were training. I said, who's your education for? Me? My education belonged to me. I said, hold up. Your education doesn't belong to you. Because one brother, one love older Tunji, Junior, how's it going? He was like, yeah, I got mad at the teacher. I didn't like the teacher, so I didn't try hard. And I could have did better in that class. And I asked him my education belongs to me, and I should have owned it more. And I said, well, let me give you one up. So what happens if your education belongs to God? That the government of God is over you, and everything you do governs is a statement on how you allow God to govern you. And we the only creature that has the will to either fall in line or not. That's the power of free will. But when you surrender to the government of God, it's not about who teaches you, it's about how well you learn regardless who teaches you. Wow. And if you have a problem with this lost in translation, and you figure out how to get your teacher to not be upset about the dialect that they teach, and say, could you please talk a little slower, because I would love to respect the information that God gave you to teach me. and I want to learn it, and I want to do this. Why? Because I'm trying to express the God in me by successfully learning this. The government of a student, God within a student. Ain't that something? And so you look at your education different if you understand that you are governed by God and the manifestation of his government through you. Wow. Ancient African wisdom. So when you talk about the government of God, God has a plan for all the things that he created. And that's what they said. He provides for everything because he has a plan for everything. Everything is on behalf of the architecture of the world in which he creates. Read the book. Study African history. Look at reality. Know who you are in God, my people. Why? Because it's self-awareness, self-discovery. God has a plan, and if you fit right into the plan that he has for you, unless you make a decision not to surrender. In African spirituality, everybody surrenders and nobody bucks. That's how they're able to have communal environments. What are your talents? What are your gifts? What did God provide in you? And we'll get into that. What did God do for you? So think about it. The next thing, in terms of the works of God, chapter 5, from the book African, was it African Philosophy? Yeah, yeah. African Religions and Philosophy by John Mbiti. Let me get to this part. Wait. Is God in the history of man? Woo. What does God do on your behalf? Woo. That's a whole different story. What does God do? And it is always said, and as I read, and this was real short because all of them had the same thing, or the commonality of the statement. It wasn't a phrase, it wasn't a word, it was, and I sat down and said, instead of me typing something up, I'm going to use a quote from Muhammad Ali to describe this chapter in the book. God works through people. It's not me. God's history. God works through people. It's not me. I'm only doing what I'm called to do. And when you are in tune and harmony with God, when everything that you do leads toward the liberation of black people. Wow. If it only serves you and is not of the creator, ain't that something? This is not God when our community is not getting better. What? The principalities around you is not getting better. There was, oh wait, that was I don't believe I didn't have, I wanted to show that. I said, in terms of the government of God, well, we're going to put it this way. And there's a couple of things we want to hear right here. There we go. Self-government, family or marital government. Then you got the body or the society or the church government, civil government, then God. There's levels of governing in the world. And what would life be like if your self-government was a government unto your relationship to the creator? What is your relationships? Now it says, you love your God with all your heart, mind, your soul, and your brother as thyself. Communities are different. You'll understand when we talk about Kush and the Nile and having plenty and making sure everyone eats. That's why it was communal. Another thing about this was, in terms of the works of God. Wow. What God provides you and he works you guys, and they used the issue of time. And let me go back to this. And they talked about the works of God in reference to what is he doing. God gives you time. And I paused when I said, wow, that is a work of God. Yes, because you can't produce it, but it's always being produced in you. You are a second older, a nanosecond older. Your coding is changing. Your gray is to your black is turning gray. Your hair is, just your wrinkles is coming through. God is giving you time. And he's not moving you to your future. Wow. That's not an understanding of African spirituality, because there is no future. God is moving you toward your Zamani. What? He's moving to you towards, as you experience God, you're making history every second. You're making history every second. And so if you give God every second, what you manifest in your sasa is something beautiful that you give to the Creator, because you gave the Creator your best. And at the end of your nows, what God has given you is your zamani, the history of you, which is the history of Him through you. Ain't that something? God gives you time, and that's why time is sacred. How we live it is sacred. How we walk through it is sacred, because that's one thing on earth you definitely can't get back. Don't waste your time. We have just went through chapter 5, the works of God, and hopefully this has blessed you the way it has blessed me. Right? And we will take our time to look at chapter 6 next week. One love.